When I came home from work that afternoon, I stood frozen in my driveway, staring at the mess that used to be my brand new backyard fence. It had taken me weeks to build, measuring, painting, sweating under the sun, and now it was gone. All that was left were jagged pieces of wood and a bright orange notice from the HOA taped to my front door. According to them, my fence was too tall and violated neighborhood aesthetics. No warning, no discussion, just ... At first, I thought maybe it was some kind of mistake. I even walked the entire neighborhood, counting at least 3 fences taller than mine still standing proud. So why mine? That's when I realized this wasn't about height. It was about control. Someone on the HOA board clearly had a personal issue, or maybe they just enjoyed throwing their weight around. Either way, they had no idea who they were messing with, because here's the thing: they didn't know my day job. Tease. They didn't know. I sit on the city's zoning commission. That's right, it's the very same zoning rules they thought they could twist to suit their agenda. I help write and enforce those. I've spent years working through city codes, understanding legal boundaries, and making sure communities are treated fairly. And now they were trying to school me on zoning violations. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, already pulling up municipal documents on my laptop. If they thought this was over, they were in for a surprise. I wasn't just going to rebuild my fence, was going to make a statement. And what happened next? Well, let's just say the HOA's plan backfired in a way they never saw coming. But before I tell you exactly how it unfolded, trust me, you don't want to miss this part. Let me show you what really started it all. The whole mess really started about a month before the fence came down. I'd recently replaced the old rotting one with something cleaner and sturdier, 6 feet tall. Wooden panels, nothing flashy. It was within the city's legal height limits, and I even double-checked the local zoning ordinances just to be sure. But shortly after it went up, I started getting these subtle, passive-aggressive comments from one of my neighbors. Doug, he's on the HOA board and the type who peers through the blinds at 6 a.m. just to log violations in his little notebook. At first, I shrugged it off. He didn't like the color, thought it stood out too much, said it interfered with the community's visual harmony. Whatever that means. A week later, I got a formal letter from the HOA saying the fence needed to come down or be modified within 10 days. I immediately replied, citing the exact zoning code that allows fences up to 6 feet in height in backyards. I thought that would be the end of it, but instead, silence. No response, no follow, dash up, ... until the demolition. That's when things got personal. I found out through a friend in the neighborhood that Doug had apparently rallied the board behind closed doors, convincing them that I was setting a dangerous precedent. Funny, considering the HOA never had an issue with his 8-foot pergola or the bright blue shed on his property. It was becoming pretty clear this wasn't about rules. It was about power and petty grudges. What they didn't realize was I'd documented everything. Photos, emails, timestamps, even footage from my security camera of the crew tearing down the fence. And while they may have thought I was just another homeowner they could steamroll, they were about to learn the hard way that I knew how to fight back with facts, law, and a whole lot of patience. Over the next few days, kept things quiet. I didn't respond to the HOA's smug little follow-up letter confirming the removal. I didn't confront Doug at the mailbox, even though I saw him grinning from ear to ear like he'd just won something. What I did instead was gather more. I requested the official meeting notes from the HOA board, something homeowners are legally entitled to. No surprise, they stalled on providing them. That raised another red flag. It was starting to look like they had approved the fence removal in some kind of emergency meeting, probably without proper notice to residents. That alone could be a violation of both the HOA's bylaws and state HOA transparency laws. Meanwhile, I kept hearing whispers around the neighborhood. Some folks thought I'd put up the fence to block someone's view. Others said Doug had complained it shaded part of his garden. There was even talk that someone on the board had family in the fencing business and wanted to use this as an excuse to recommend their company for future standardization projects. The more I listened, the more obvious it became this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was politics, plain and simple. Neighborhood politics, where power plays out in petty actions and backdoor decisions. One neighbor, Lisa, came by and quietly said she was worried. Apparently, the HOA had recently fined her for having her recycling bin visible from the street for just one day, something she'd never had trouble with before. She suspected they were starting to tighten their grip across the board, testing how far they could push. And I wasn't the only one noticing. Another homeowner was thinking about filing a complaint over selective enforcement. Something was shifting in our quiet little neighborhood. The fence was just the first shot fired. And I had a feeling this was about to get much bigger. Over the next week, things got strangely quiet. Too quiet. No more notices, no emails, no contact from the HOA at all. That's when I knew something was up. They were stalling, probably hoping I'd just let it go. But what they didn't know was that I'd already spoken with the city's legal department. And they confirmed what I suspected. The HOA had zero authority to tear down my fence without a court order. They had crossed a serious line. And once I brought zoning regulations into the picture, it wasn't just a neighborhood squabble anymore. It was a legal issue. I kept my cool and acted like nothing was wrong. But behind the scenes, I was digging into everything, pulling the HOAs. Public filings, checking their meeting schedules, reviewing the community bylaws. And then, boom, I found it. A huge procedural error. The emergency meeting they used to justify removing my fence hadn't followed the HOA's own rules. There was no quorum, no public notice, no vote on record. Just Doug and two others making a shady call behind everyone's back. That meant the action they took wasn't just unethical, it was invalid. The tension in the neighborhood was growing. People who normally waved and smiled were now whispering and looking over their shoulders. Some residents even started reaching out to me, asking questions about their rights and wondering if the HOA had gone too far. Word had started to spread that I wasn't just a homeowner, I was the city's zoning commissioner, and that changed everything. Suddenly, the board wasn't so confident. Doug stopped smiling. His wife started parking on the opposite side of the street. I could feel it building. Something was about to break. And I had every document, every law, and every bit of leverage ready. The only question now was, should I make this public, or give them a chance to fix what they broke? Either way, things weren't going back to the way they were. Not after this. Just as I was weighing whether to take the legal route or confront the HOA directly, something unexpected happened. I received an anonymous envelope in my mailbox, no return address. No name, just a plain manila envelope, sealed tight. Inside was a single sheet of paper, photocopied with what looked like a portion of an internal email thread from the HOA board. At first, I thought it was a prank, but the names were real. The content, even worse than I imagined. One of the board members, not Doug, had written, "If we don't take care of this now, he'll set a precedent. No way someone from zoning gets to ignore our rules. Take it down before he files anything." That changed everything. It wasn't just pettiness anymore. This was calculated. They knew exactly who I was. They knew I was the zoning commissioner and still went forward with the demolition. And now they were actively trying to silence my position by making an example out of me. This wasn't just about offense. This was about control, power, and sending a message to every homeowner in the neighborhood, even if you know the law. The HOA's word is final, but that wasn't the only thing in the envelope. There was also a list handwritten of properties flagged for review by the board over the next few months, And some of the names on that list, they were the very same neighbors who had spoken to me privately about their concerns. Lisa was on there. So was a retired couple down the block who just installed solar panels. It was like a quiet hit list, and suddenly, it all made sense. They weren't just reacting to me, they were laying the groundwork to tighten their grip on the entire community. And if I didn't act soon, more people were going to get steamrolled. But I still didn't know who sent the envelope, and I had no idea just how deep this power grab really went. I finally decided it was time to go public. I printed the email, gathered every document, and showed up at the next HOA meeting Hurley.com, and fully prepared. The room was packed, more than I'd ever seen. Word had clearly gotten out. Doug was seated at the front, smug as ever, until I stood up and calmly introduced myself. Not just as a homeowner, but as the city's zoning commissioner. The room went quiet. I laid out everything: the legal height limits, the lack of a proper vote, the internal email, and the hit list of targeted neighbors. Gasps and murmurs spread like wildfire. Doug's face turned pale. When I read the part of the email that showed they intentionally acted without authority, one board member actually got up and walked out. I wasn't there to grandstand. I just wanted accountability. So I gave them a choice: either reinstate the fence with full reimbursement, issue a public apology to the affected homeowners, and commit to a new vote-based system with homeowner inputter. I'd file a formal ethics complaint and bring the city's legal department into it. They had no defense left. One by one, the rest of the board members agreed to step down. Doug tried to resist, but when I revealed the city's investigation had already started thanks to a formal complaint I'd quietly filed 2 days before he folded, the neighborhood felt different after that meeting. Relief, mostly. People came up to me and thanked me for standing up. Some even apologized for staying silent. But just when I thought the chapter had closed, a week later, I got another envelope. This one had no threats, no documents, just a photo. It was of my house, taken at night. No note, no name. Just proof that someone was still watching. And just like that, I realized this wasn't entirely over. For a few days after that photo arrived, I didn't sleep much. I kept checking the cameras, double-locking the doors, scanning the street every time I pulled into the driveway, but nothing else happened. No more envelopes, no strange cars, no late-night visitors. Eventually, I came to accept that the photo was probably a final scare tactic, someone's way of trying to rattle me. And yeah, it worked for a while. But what mattered more was that the bigger battle was over. The HOA had been held accountable. New leadership was voted in by the community, and best of all, the fence was rebuilt, this time fully paid for by the HOA's reserve fund. With an official apology sent to every homeowner, Doug quietly moved out a few months later. No farewell, no warning. Just a for sale sign one day and an empty driveway the next. No one really asked where he went. Most were just glad to see the power games leave with him. As for the neighbors who were on that secret list, every one of them got a personal assurance from the new board that no unfair action would be taken. Things in the neighborhood actually started to feel like a community again. People talked more, looked out for each other, even started organizing their own meetings, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. I kept the photo, not out of fear, but as a reminder that even in quiet neighborhoods, with well-kept lawns and smiling faces, power can get abused. And sometimes, all it takes is one act of standing up to make things better for everyone. Being a zoning commissioner helped me understand the rules, but being a homeowner and part of this place reminded me why it matters to protect those rules. So yeah, they tore down my fence. But in the end, I helped rebuild something stronger. A voice for fairness, and a neighborhood that finally stood up for itself.